Welcome to DPC Pediatrician. We're Dr. Phil Boucher
and Dr. Marina Capella, two DPC pediatricians who are on a mission to share our love of direct primary care with you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to DPC Pediatrician. Okay, we realized that we talk a lot about boundaries. Like a lot of our conversations, I'm thinking of our recent talk on text messaging, I'm thinking about our recent talk on scheduling, have all also incorporated like set boundaries, hold boundaries, those sorts of things. And so we thought it would be fun today to just do some like case studies of how would you approach, because it's nice to say put boundaries in place, don't answer the phone and those sorts of things. But we have been both in practice long enough that we've had lots of times where the patients come up to the boundaries, and it's not their fault necessarily that they've come up to the boundaries. It's just that their kid doesn't get sick at 10 in the morning, when it's perfectly like come on in sort of time. And so we wanted to kind of talk through the logistics of how we actually handle some of these boundary issues so that you feel comfortable in understanding or can hear from us how we approach boundaries in our own practice. We haven't really reviewed these together, so it's going to be a little bit on the fly of like, what would you do? What would I do sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And the first one that I wanted to start with, you'll notice that a lot of these are temporally related because it's rare that at 10 in the morning, people are breaking boundaries. When you're open and you're available, there's not as much boundary breaking that happens. So the first one that I came up with, Marina, that I want your take on is the text message at 7 p.m. My kid has a barky cough and what should I do? And the reason that I bring this one up is because this sort of thing gets cited sometimes in the Facebook groups of, I just went over to their house and I gave them a dose of Decadron, or I met them at the office at 11 p.m. at night to give them a dose of Decadron. And for me, that would break my boundaries. I'm not going to leave home for some croup at 11 o'clock at night, and I'll tell you what I would do in this circumstance, but I want to hear from you, Marina. What would you do if somebody, let's just make it more specifically the 7-month-old with the barky cough at 7 p.m. at night?
Yeah. So, my boundaries are different than yours. And that's one thing that's important to acknowledge is that we all get to set our own boundaries, right? And I will reiterate what I said in our past episode about boundaries, which was quite a while ago, but boundaries are not about changing other people's behavior. Boundaries are about deciding how you will respond to whatever behavior happens to come at you from other people, right? So it really helps to kind of think through some of these of like, what would I do given my own personal boundaries that I want to set? How would I respond to someone's maybe unreasonable request, right? Or just urgent request, and whatever the case may be. So in that case, if I'm already home or I just left the office, which typically I work till 6 and then I'm leaving around 7 on the long days that I do work, but that's not the case for everyone. For me, I would really be like, I'm tired. I want to go home and eat dinner with my husband. Mm-hmm. I really don't want to figure out how to see them tonight. Yeah. But croup is something that's pretty easy to just deal with over text message. And so I would probably do a quick phone call or a quick series of text messages. Make sure that this truly is croup, right? Mm-hmm. And that there's nothing else going on. If it's severe enough, I would maybe just say, hey, I can send in a prescription for dexamethasone. Mm-hmm. One dose usually helps a lot to prevent some of the dangerous levels of croup that can happen in the middle of the night at night. So, and I would also give some, anticipatory guidance around like cold air and some other comfort measures that they can enact as well for the viral syndrome that their kid is experiencing. And that would probably take me, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the family and the level of reassurance they need. But for me, that's within my boundaries, right, that I'm willing to do. But I wouldn't want to go back to the office. That's an hour of going back, having the visit, documenting, going back home. Right. So I'm curious, with your set of boundaries that you have for yourself in your practice, Phil, what would you do?
I would be at home. I would be like seeing the message come in. And then what I would probably do, we already get like we're not open right now, blah, blah, blah message that I've talked about on other episodes too. But if I saw, the 7-month-old has the croupy cough, I would probably text them and say, hey, we can definitely get you in the morning. What I would try and do tonight is get their nose cleaned out so that they don't have a bunch of gunk in there. And then use cold air, like either going outside if it's a cool night or, putting them in front of the freezer or something like that. And then let's see them in the morning. Now, here's what to do if they're having difficulty breathing, if they're breathing so fast that they can't eat, something along those lines, and I'm going to want you to go to the ER. That would be my typical approach. And if I didn't see it until later in the evening, or if it was 11 o'clock thing, then I wouldn't see that.
Yeah.
And they would either figure it out, or they would follow the advice from our text message reply of either calling our triage line or going to the ER or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That would be my approach to the 7 p.m. text message.
Yeah. And I think that's totally reasonable, because the parent still gets some ideas of how they can support their child, and also gets a little message about, hey, here are the red flags for when you should go get seen in the middle of the night. Most kids don't really get to that dangerous. They can get to like the, oh my gosh, like it's a barky cough and he can't sleep. But most kids with croup don't get to that level of, dangerous stridor needing, racemic epi and all of that stuff. So it's usually okay. But if I feel like it's a kid who's predisposed to that, that's when I would do the dexamethasone and just tell them, hey, this is how you crush the tablet. You mix it with something sweet and you give it to them at home, etc. That's so easy to do. So whatever your approach, you can see two different approaches depending on our predispositions and our boundaries.
One other thing that as you're saying that made me think of is about a few months ago, this almost exact scenario happened, except it was at 4:30 and I was getting ready to leave, and my son had guitar, and it was a family that I knew really well and actually knew what part of town they lived in, and they lived relatively close to where the guitar was. And so I said, hey, I'm leaving right now, but if you meet me over by Blue Raven at 6:30, I'll just pass off a dose of dexamethasone to you. And you could have had croup before. The dad was there. He had a nice coffee for me. And I gave him the dexamethasone and merry way. Now, if I wasn't going to do that, I wouldn't have specifically gone to that. But the nice thing is, in DPC, you can say, okay, this is actually still within my boundaries, because it's not a big deal, because I'm just sitting outside of the guitar place to help this family out. And it made a big difference for them. The same sort of thing happened with dance, with my kids' dance. A kid had a scalp laceration and texted me right as I was getting ready to leave home to take my girls to dance. And I was like, well, I can't meet you at the office. You can go to urgent care and they'll put a staple in, but I'm going to be dance for the next hour. I'll bring my staples because I had some at home with me, and I'll meet you in the parking lot and we'll just put 2 staples in the head. And the parents were just ecstatic. And that was still within the boundaries. Now, if I hadn't been going to dance, I wouldn't have gone to do that. But it worked out fine that I was able to offer that, and the timing worked out right to just, like sometimes those things, the stars align, and it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's not a big deal. Just meet me here. And then we did it, and it was really easy. So I think that's kind of the nice thing about DPC too, is that you don't have to have these hard and fast rules, because there's all these other people that are going to do it differently, or one of your partners will be pissed because you did this thing outside of the scope, and then they think that all parents expect that. You get to pick. You get to do what you like, and when it is within those boundaries that are flexible and movable as well.
I have one for you. So this is one that's come up a few times in the Facebook group and has happened to me many times. So you have someone, a parent, who reaches out, let's say at 8 a.m, saying, hey, my kid, I think they might have strep or whatever it is, right? Can you see them today? And you're in the clinic, but maybe you're in the clinic from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 1, because you have an event for your kid, right? And so you tell the parent, yes, I'm here. I can see you at 9 a.m. And they say, okay. Well, 9 a.m. comes and goes, and 9:15 comes and goes, and you've set aside, let's say you were generous, you're new, you're not that busy, you had set aside an hour, right? Which you may or may not do. But then 9:30 comes around. So what do you do by that point? Like, if they're not showing up on time,
right?
At what point do you intervene? Do you check in? Do you let it, and so the story that I had heard once from another pediatrician was something about they checked in after they were late a certain amount of time. And then the mom said, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to make it till noon. And, that's a bit of a unique response. But when do you intervene with late arrivals, Phil?
Right.
What amount of generosity do you give?
That's a good question. I mean, I think this specific one triggers for me, or makes me think of like Saturdays. Like, we have a short availability on Saturdays, and I watch the clock like a hawk. And if they're a few minutes late on Saturdays, I'm gonna be like, hey, are you guys on your way? Is everything okay? Because I want to get out there lickety split. If they say, hey, we can't make it till noon or 1 in the afternoon, I'm going to say, shoot, guys, we're not going to be available then. So here's your options. One, we can wait if waiting is an acceptable thing. Or two, there's an urgent care at this address that can help you at that time. And since
Yeah.
I've offered, I don't feel bad at all about being like, okay, I offered you this time. It was a same day visit. I'm not going to delete the dance recital or the baseball game or the trip to the pool just because they're not available when they ask for it, and they're obviously having to deal with their sick kid, so they're going to have to figure out how to balance that themselves with their work
Mhm.
and other obligations and all those sorts of things. That's would be my approach of, okay, you guys, I gave you a time. These times work. These times don't work.
Mhm.
You pick. Here's some options of what works. Now,
Yeah.
on the regular, if they're 30 minutes late for the appointment, we will text them and we'll say, hey, is everything okay? It's not a very common thing that I find that parents are exceedingly late, or they usually text or call
Mhm.
and they say, hey, we're stuck in traffic, or there was an accident, or they
Yeah.
pooped right when we were getting in the car, and so we had to go in and change. Then we just put them back in. Our schedule is not so full that there's no buffer, there's no margin time. We just make those
Yeah.
sorts of things work. But if they just totally blow off the appointment, or then they say like this won't work in the later, then I would just give them the options that are within my abilities, and also say you might just have to go to urgent care if these times don't work.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what I would do is usually if it's a day that I know is completely full and I just don't have other times that I could see them, or it's kind of that weekend that's like prime time and I don't want to stay late either, right? I do the same thing. If they're about 10 minutes late, I text them and say, "Hey, are you on your way?" Or if it's a family that's routinely late, I have my assistant call beforehand,
Right.
that morning or at the beginning of the day and say, "Hey, do you know your appointment is at this time? And are you going to be here?" Right. But I think people can get kind of stuck in this sort of issue because of our own inability sometimes to be comfortable setting boundaries.
Mhm.
I will say that I really think that there's a gender discrepancy
Oh,
here.
for
A
sure.
lot of women, we've been socialized to be people pleasers, right?
Mhm.
And we tend to bend over backwards more for our families, parents, patients, right? And so in this particular case, the details I remember were that this parent kept on pushing the appointment to later and later.
Mhm.
And that pediatrician was waiting around from like 9 a.m. till noon, and this family hadn't showed up and kept on saying, "Oh, we're coming a little later, a little
Right.
later." And she had to be out of there by like 12:30 or 1. And it breeds a lot of resentment if you allow
Totally.
yourself to be stepped over. And so I think really thinking about this and like, what would I do and how can I establish a protocol for what I would do in these situations? I really liked your response, Phil, that says, "Oh, shoot, that's not going to work for me." Right? It's completely fine to say, "Hey, I did offer you something that doesn't work for you. Unfortunately, the alternatives don't work for me,
Right.
but here is what you can do." Right.
Right.
And so if we allow ourselves to get stepped on over and over, the resentment builds and builds and builds. And then we want to text back angrily. Right.
For
And
sure.
and and so
Or you hold
just
it
don't
against
even
them and
allow.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
that resentment spiral.
Uh-huh. And so if we just know what our response is going to be ahead of time in those situations and we decide what a professional response will be
Mhm.
without any resentment, it makes it so much easier. But I do see women struggling a lot more. And I think it's not just us, I think it's also patients
That's what I was
who
gonna add
step
too.
on us a
It's
lot more.
absolutely the
Yeah.
patients that step on the female physicians much more. So I 100% realize the privilege of my position to be like, no, go fly a kite. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Patients have a different tolerance of that depending on
Mhm.
who they're talking with, male or female. And so I totally get that it's much more difficult for female physicians to navigate that and not have
Mhm.
people push back the way that they would not push back a male physician. So that is absolutely the case.
Mhm. Yeah. But I still believe that like the more we practice, whether or not our patients are expecting more of us or whether or not we've been socialized a different way or if you're
Yeah.
uncomfortable, the more that we practice just, respecting that boundary and reiterating that boundary for patients, in a non-resentful way, right? Then the more they will come to just understand that. And when we do see them, we treat them with the utmost care and respect. And they come to love us because of those interactions that they have with us.
Right.
And they just get trained. People are trainable.
Totally.
Absolutely.
They're
Right.
very trainable for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're not used to that, but the all of the interactions that we have train them one way or the other. If we're always responding to their text messages at 9 p.m. at night, they're trained, hey, they're actually available at 9 p.m. at night. So that's convenient
Mm-hmm.
for me. So that's when I'm going to start, sending them messages. If they're trained
Uh-huh.
to, you can message them, but I'm not going to reply until the morning, then they're trained
Yeah.
to, I'm going to text at 9 p.m. at night, but it's convenient for me, but I know I'm not going to get a reply till 8:30
Yeah.
tomorrow. Great. That's
Exactly.
trainable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I got one for you.
Let's do another one.
You do a lot of integrative pediatrics, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of online tests available.
Yep.
A patient, yep, a patient brings in lab tests from, they sent their baby's poop off in the mail, or their saliva, or I don't know what all these different tests,
Yeah.
what sort of samples they take. I'm sure they take all of them.
Uh-huh.
They send these results to you, and they come into the office and they say, hey, I want you to not only interpret this thing that I printed off that I got in the mail, but I also want you to treat that. What's your approach when it comes to the medical side of things? Because they obviously got it from somewhere, but
Yeah.
they lack the prescriptive ability to actually get it addressed. And somebody told
Yeah.
them, you got to go in so that they can give you X, Y, and Z. And let's just say it's something that you're not accustomed to or typically would manage or maybe even believe in, that it's a thing. How do you approach that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh gosh, that whole world of online testing that patients can just order for themselves is a little bit of like a wild west in
Mhm.
medicine, because there's some stuff that really is legitimate and evidence-based, and there's some stuff that is completely bogus. So a lot of it is trying to sift through that and trying to discern whether or not this is a legitimate type of test or a
Right.
reliable sort of test. Now, because I'm integrative and I really want to get better at helping people with maybe like non-traditional types of evaluations and testing, and I actually do know about some of those
Right.
and have learned about some of those, I do my best to really investigate it, to look it up, and to help them interpret to the best of my ability. However, sometimes if I feel like it really is something that I cannot understand and cannot understand with just like, 5 minutes of searching the internet or searching my resources of information,
Mhm.
then sometimes I might say, you know what, this is just not within my expertise. I'm not familiar with this,
Totally.
right? And I wish I could help you, but I can't. So I would reach out maybe to, I don't know if they're consultants with the company or whatever it is, right? But I also warn parents, take it with a grain of salt, because this is a new frontier, and some of this may be evidence-based and reliable and some of this may not be,
Yeah.
right? I know that you're trying to do the best for your child and you're trying to get to the root of these problems. So let's spend our time looking at what I can do,
Right.
what is within my expertise, and maybe I can help you figure out some alternative things, even if we don't completely understand what these test results mean.
Right.
Right.
I love it.
I see this a lot in the world of like stool testing. Although the stool testing is for like microbiome analysis is actually getting better and better. And there is a lot of evidence behind some of that. And then the mold testing world is where I'm still kind of trying to to
Yeah.
understand it, to piece it together. I feel like there's a lot of exaggeration. Even if mold toxicity really truly can be a thing, there's a lot of exaggeration out there of like all of my problems and all of your problems and everyone's problems are related to mold,
Right.
right? And we just need to rid the world of mold, which is ridiculous, right?
Right.
So yeah, I try to be honest and say, if something is outside my area of expertise and I really don't feel comfortable that I could get to that level of understanding to help them with it, versus something that I'm a little familiar with and with a little more digging, I can help them interpret, versus something that I think, there are a few things that I feel like just are not evidence-based, and I
Yeah.
do my best
Dangerous. And
to
some of them are
word it
dangerous too.
kindly. Yeah.
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 I think
What about you? What if a parent approached you with that kind of thing? Because I know you're in the
similar.
pandas world a little bit, and I'm
Yeah.
sure parents have gone out there and tried to figure things out on their own sometimes.
I think the nice thing is if you say, this is our approach, and this is what we typically do when patients come in with these sort of symptoms. And
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on this PDF that you brought me. And I think that this is something that I don't feel comfortable with just because I lack the knowledge and expertise and training with.
Yeah.
But here's where I think we can start. And maybe you can find somebody that can help with this specific PDF that you've brought me and the specific tests. Like, here's what I can
Mhm.
do, here's what I cannot do. Same sort of
Yeah.
thing. I think that in DPC we're often, maybe I'm overspeaking, but I think we're often reluctant to make patients go somewhere else to get some care because we feel like we can do most of the things because we've
Uh-huh.
gotten out of the system where it was refer, 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 and maybe we're reflexively avoiding referring when there are
Uh-huh.
opportunities to either refer out or say, that's just not my area of expertise. Like, I just don't
Yeah.
know enough to manage that as well as you deserve. And so that's kind of my
Mhm.
approach when it's like, yeah, I'm not really sure. And luckily I have some good mentors in the pandas world too, that I can say, yeah, I've talked with Dr. So-and-so and we've never come up with a good plan for this. Like, this is a little bit too nebulous to have a good sense of how we should approach that. There might be somebody out there that can help you. And I would also like us to make sure that we're focusing on these other areas too, rather than attributing it all to one specific thing,
Yeah.
like mold, like you brought up. So I think that's my
Uh-huh.
typical approach when it comes to things. It's very similar to yours of like, this
Mhm.
is not something that I'm an expert in, but here's what I think we also can do.
Mhm. Yeah. I think as long as you don't end make them feel judged,
Right.
right? And don't just end the conversation of like, someone else did this. I can't help you. Like,
Right.
no, just frame it in a kind, respectful way and say,
Right.
even though I don't understand that, there's so many other things that we can try to figure out and do that I can help you with, right?
For
I think
sure.
that's a more compassionate approach because parents really, I mean, they're not trying to anger you. They're just
Right.
learning all of these things on the internet and trying to do the best by their child, right?
Well, and it's so confusing because there's so much information out there
Yes.
and so many non-experts saying that they're the expert and they can explain all of your kids' behaviors and sleep issues and all those sorts of things.
Yes.
It's all this one thing that's been held back from you or that they're preventing you from knowing or those sorts of things.
Hmm.
How would you not, as a parent, if you're frustrated and at your wit's end and exhausted and anxious about it, be like, this person has told me all of the things that I've been facing, and they say it's all because of this one specific thing, then
Yeah,
how are you not going to fall into that
exactly. Yeah,
and like put your hope in that?
absolutely. People want to feel better. They want their kids to feel better. There's a
Yeah.
lot of clever marketing out there for
Oh, for
sure.
sure.
I'm going to ask you maybe just one other one we'll talk about. What about the parent that is like sending you text messages daily
Mm,
to report on their baby's stools or urines or their sleep, how many naps and how many hours, like that
right.
over anxious parent who just feels the need to check in with their pediatrician about every little detail? How do
I,
you manage
I
that?
thought this would come up a lot more, to be honest with you, when I started. Like, I thought we would be getting the deluge all the time of the parents. I think one of the things that protects against that is the fact that they know that they have something in their diaper bag or when they need us. Like, we're in their
Yeah.
diaper bag when they need us. I don't have to constantly be seeking all this care. So I found that happens a
Mhm.
lot less than I was expecting when it comes to all of the little check-ins or
Yeah.
the data dumps of here's what their
Uh-huh.
sleep looked like last night. What should we do? And
Right.
so my approach when it feels like we're getting too many communication episodes is
Mhm.
to say, hey, I know we're working on this. I think we need to trend it out a little bit further. I want you to do these things this week, and then I'm going to check in next week and see how we're doing and where we're at with things. And
Yeah.
then I schedule the text message so that I don't forget. And then Monday morning rolls
Uh-huh.
around and they get a text message that says, how's it going with pooping? How's it going with sleeping? Whatever it might be. So that then the parents learn, okay, it does take a little bit of time. Like, I can't give all these data points and expect a change in the plan every single data point because then we'll
Yeah.
never have any consistency. We'll never have it take the time that it needs to
Uh-huh.
actually adjust. And so I think it's a lot of
Mhm.
resetting expectations of how quickly
Yeah.
something's going to improve, whether it's they're pooping on the potty or they're sleeping or their meal times or anything along those lines. Like it's going to take some time, and that's okay. Now we have a couple parents that will, like, their kids, I don't know if they have this in Utah, but they're on these like check-in check-out programs, and they like to use
Mhm.
our text messaging line as their like documentation system for their daily check in, check out. So what their behaviors were like today. And so what we do, it's not so onerous that it's a big hassle, is we just let it sit there and they know we're not going to respond to every single time that they send the little document data dump. And then we can look at it
Yeah.
together over a couple of weeks and see where,
Yeah.
oh, Mondays were always hard. Oh, Fridays were always hard. Oh, afternoon was always hard. Those sorts of things. We can like have that be the collective space and try and get them to instead like keep a PDF on their phone rather than texting
Right.
all those. But we can understand that it's helpful to be able to share that and then know where that is.
Uh-huh.
So there's a little
Yeah.
bit of both. I think it's again setting the expectations. Like if you text me their check-in, check-out sheet every day, I'm not going to reply every day, and I'm definitely not going to change the plan every day based on how so and so did from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock today. We're going to trend this out over time, and then we'll make a new plan once we have enough data collected in the big picture that we can see if we're on the right track or if we're not on the right track. What about you? How would
Mhm.
you handle getting too frequent of communications about
Right.
minor trends in?
Yeah, I think I've had a couple of parents, not too many, thankfully, their kids have chronic abdominal pain. Our
Mhm.
favorite, thing to deal with as pediatricians. And so they'll sometimes kind of over text me about like, oh, she had this today and that today. And I think just kind of paring down how I respond is like, not making too much of it, or
Mhm.
sometimes strategically ignoring the text messages,
Totally.
right? That can be helpful, but acknowledging it enough that they feel like, okay, I'm there, I'm seeing it,
Right.
but maybe just minimal text messages. Oh, thanks for letting me know. As long as she's eating and doing, pooping at least this often, or she's not tender to touch, or this or that, I'll give, she should, just stay the course and continue monitoring, and we'll follow up at your next visit in 2 weeks, right? So
Mhm.
something that acknowledges it and reassures and says, okay, like as long as this. And then if I just kind of like don't respond immediately, because
Yeah.
sometimes when we respond immediately, and sometimes it's just because we happen to see it and we're available,
Right.
but if we respond immediately consistently, it sort of feeds into the parents' like perception that, oh, this is important.
I need to
And
keep
this is
giving updates.
something
I need
that,
to keep giving updates. Like,
yeah,
where's updates? Yeah.
exactly. And so just delaying my response times a little bit, or strategically not responding when it's, a 7 p.m. text until the next day at
Right.
noon, that kind of thing can be helpful. But honestly, I feel like with those anxious parents, or the parents that just have kids with something that they're really trying to figure out, as long as we are there and we're checking in frequently in the beginning, their level of anxiety tends to calm down over time.
Oh, for
And
sure.
the frequency of those messages go down over time, as
Yeah.
long as we're not overreacting to them as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that the longitudinal experience of DPC is that there's some parents that will have flares where they're communicating a lot more and then it drops to nothing. And it's not this
Yeah.
just like consistent thing. And if they keep asking, it's usually because there's something missing that we haven't quite figured out, that's in the
Yeah.
back of their mind that they haven't asked or they haven't even figured out that they need to know. And if we can spend a little time like, what is it that's really worrying about this? Or what is your expectation around your child or the thing that they're facing? If we can learn that and go, oh yeah, you just have the wrong expectations. Like tone down the expectations of how quickly this behavioral issue or their sleep or their whatever it might
Yeah.
be is going to improve, then we're all
Mhm.
in a better place. And we can check in weekly about their sleep because it's not going to change acutely day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like sometimes when also parents are texting repeatedly about a certain issue, I sometimes will respond with something like, oh, I can see that there's a lot going on around this. Why don't you continue to like keep a log of what's happening, and we're going to see you next Tuesday, or, and then that way you still have like, a point in time when they will be able to speak to you
Right.
face to face and address all the concerns, but then they don't feel like, oh, I don't have an appointment set up, and so I'm just going to like dump everything into text messages that should be a visit, because sometimes the stuff that's getting dumped into text messages is way better handled in a visit.
Oh, for sure.
So we can also respond in that way.
I don't want to meet yet because I need a little bit more data. Can you keep a log, and then let's meet in a couple of weeks and discuss this and do this if things.
Exactly.
Here's some signs that would say we need to meet sooner, but otherwise keep a log, and we'll touch base in 2 weeks at your visit. Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, this has been a fun discussion. Right. I hope it generates more boundary questions, because I think this is a topic that we like talking about. We talk about it enough, and that it's really important for the sake of growing your practice and being sustained in your practice is setting those boundaries.
Absolutely. All right. Hope you found it helpful. Until next time.